As we enter the main foyer here in the main house at Neverland, this was a room where Michael Jackson would greet his closest friends, and it was a room filled with artwork. These walls had huge paintings on them.
There is a place in the Santa Ynez Valley of California that time has never quite been able to let go of. Tucked behind iron gates along Figueroa Mountain Road in Los Olivos, sprawling across nearly 2,700 acres of rolling hills and oak-lined landscapes, sits one of the most famous and most complicated private estates in the entire history of American celebrity culture. You may know it by the name that made it legendary, Neverland Ranch. The name alone carries weight. It carries music, myth, childhood wonder, legal controversy, financial ruin, and an emotional gravity that no amount of time seems to fully dissolve. 17 years have passed since Michael Jackson died in a rented Holmby Hills mansion on June 25, 2009, and yet Neverland continues to surface in headlines, documentaries, films, and conversations as though it simply refuses to become history. Today we are going inside the story, the structure, the rise, the collapse, and the strange second life of the most extraordinary private residence ever built by a pop star. To understand what Neverland became, you first have to understand what Michael Jackson was trying to build, and why. By the late 1980s, Jackson was not simply famous. He was the most recognizable entertainer on the planet. Thriller had already sold tens of millions of copies. Bad was cementing his dominance. He had spent the majority of his life performing, rehearsing, touring, and existing under a spotlight that had been switched on before experiences he had been denied by the relentless machinery of the music industry. So, in 1988, when Jackson purchased a 2,700-acre working ranch in Santa Barbara County for approximately $17 million, he did not see it as a real estate investment. He saw it as an opportunity to build the world he had never been allowed to inhabit as a child. He named it after the fictional island in J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, the place where boys never grow up, where imagination is the only law, and where reality is something you choose rather than something imposed upon you. That choice of name was not accidental. It was a declaration of intent. Over the years that followed, Jackson poured an estimated $35 million in renovations and construction into the property, transforming what had been a functional ranch into something that had no real equivalent anywhere in the world. This was not the kind of celebrity home renovation where you add a pool and a tennis court and call it a compound. What Jackson built at Neverland was an entirely self-contained world, a private universe designed to feel, at every turn, like childhood made permanent. The scale of Neverland has a way of surprising people, even when they think they already know what it looked like. The main residence itself was a grand French Normandy-style manor house of approximately 13,000 square feet, built with meticulous attention to architectural detail. The floors in several rooms were sourced from a genuine 18th-century French chateau that was physically dismantled in France, shipped across the Atlantic, and reassembled on American soil by specialized craftsmen who reportedly lived on the property for months during the restoration process. The foyer greeted visitors with towering paintings, a life-sized butler statue holding a tray of cookies, and at its far end, a massive two-sided marble clock, so extraordinarily heavy that structural engineers had to be called in to reinforce the floor beneath it to prevent it from sinking through to the basement. The living room contained a grand piano covered from end to end in framed photographs of Jackson's family and closest friends. On a rotating pedestal near the fireplace sat an Academy Award statuette, the Oscar for Best Picture presented to Gone with the Wind at the 1939 ceremony, for which Jackson had paid $1.5 million at auction. But the main house was only the beginning. The grounds of Neverland were where Jackson's vision truly took physical form. The estate included a fully operational 50-seat movie theater, complete with a concession stand stocked with popcorn and ice cream, run by uniformed staff, as though it were a commercial cinema. There was a 4-acre lake with its own waterfall. There were guest cottages, a barn, a basketball court, a tennis court, and a genuine working firehouse. There was a carousel. There were whimsical gardens that, when viewed from the air, actually spelled out the word Neverland in the landscape itself. And then there was the feature that no description of the property can avoid, the amusement park. Jackson installed a full private theme park on the grounds, with rides that included a Ferris wheel, bumper cars, and a zipper, the kind of attractions you would find at a traveling state fair, except these were privately owned, privately maintained, and available exclusively to Jackson and whoever he chose to invite. Perhaps most memorably, Neverland housed a functioning zoo. Llamas, chimpanzees, giraffes, orangutans, and other exotic animals were kept on the property, cared for by a dedicated team of animal handlers. And running through all of it, tying the entire estate together, was a genuine life-sized steam train that circled the grounds on its own dedicated rail system, complete with a fully decorated Disneyland-style train station that contained a bank of surveillance monitors and a waiting area stocked with pastries for passengers. Jackson had not merely been inspired by Disneyland. He had attempted, with extraordinary resources, to build his own private version of it. Beyond the spectacle of the grounds, the interior of the main residence contained details that spoke just as powerfully to the man who lived there. Jackson's private master bedroom suite was secured by a coded entry panel, a security keypad that controlled access to his personal quarters independently from the rest of the house. The suite itself was described by those who worked at Neverland as the size of a standalone home. It was a 2-story space with walk-in closets on both sides, a large jacuzzi, and a sleeping loft accessible by a private staircase, where Jackson's actual bed was positioned against the wall beneath a full sequined bedspread that mirrored the dazzling stage costumes he was known for wearing in concert. Inside one of the closets, hidden behind a panel concealed by the hanging clothing, was a secondary secured compartment, a secret room within a room, protected by its own triple lock system and accessible only through a code panel hidden inside a cabinet. Whatever Jackson used it for, he clearly intended that almost no one would ever know it existed. For all its wonder, Neverland was never destined to remain intact. The first serious cracks appeared in 1993, when allegations of child sexual abuse were made against Jackson by the family of a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler. Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department executed a search warrant on the property and Neverland when a British documentary broadcast footage of Jackson holding hands with a 13-year-old cancer survivor and speaking about sharing his bedroom. Santa Barbara authorities launched another investigation, and in November 2003, law enforcement executed another search of the property. In 2005, Jackson stood trial on multiple counts of child sexual abuse and related charges. He was acquitted on all counts, but the emotional toll was severe. Jackson left Neverland immediately after his acquittal and never returned. He described the ranch as a place that had been violated, a home he could no longer feel at peace in. The property that had taken years to build and tens of millions of dollars to fill had been abandoned by the only person it had ever been designed for. Jackson's departure marked the beginning of a steep financial unraveling that mirrored the broader chaos of his later years. In 2008, he defaulted on a $24.5 million loan that had been secured against the Neverland property. The investment firm Colony Capital stepped in, restructuring the debt and effectively taking partial ownership of the estate. After Jackson's death in June 2009, the process of dismantling Neverland's most iconic features accelerated. The petting zoo was closed, and the animals were relocated. The amusement park rides, the Ferris wheel, the bumper cars, the carousel, were removed from the grounds and sold. Subsequent reporting tracked those rides to state fairs and carnivals across California, Oregon, and Washington, with certain pieces eventually finding permanent homes at Coney Island in New York and Beach Bend Park in Kentucky. The private fantasy had been physically broken apart and scattered across the country. The property itself was listed for sale in 2015 at an asking price of $100 million. The market was not interested. The price was reduced to $67 million, then $31 million. The name was quietly changed to Sycamore Valley Ranch in an attempt to separate the listing from its overwhelming cultural baggage. Finally, in 2020, billionaire supermarket and private equity magnate Ron Burkle purchased the estate for $22 million, a figure that, when measured against the $17 million Jackson originally paid in 1988 and the $35 million he spent in improvements, represents one of the most staggering examples of celebrity real estate devaluation in modern history. A property that Jackson had built into something utterly unique in the world sold for less than the comeback. Burkle did not purchase the ranch to let it continue deteriorating. By 2022, Santa Barbara County officials confirmed that active renovation work was underway.